McKamey Manor, supposedly the world's most extreme, immersive horror experience. This place caught my attention for being truly strange, twisted, and shrouded in mystery. And seeing how many of you are probably bored out of your minds right now, for obvious reasons, I thought this would be a good time to do a deep dive into this dark attraction, and see if we can figure out if the stories about this haunt are authentic, or if they're all just smoke and mirrors. Fair warning, I'll be using some video clips in this one that might disturb some of you. Try to stick with me. Here we go. So, first thing you're probably asking is, lazy, what even is McKamey Manor? According to many people, McKamey Manor is the most extreme haunted house you can legally visit in the USA, though the legality of some of the things that go on there is questionable to say the least. Basically, it's a place you can sign up to visit for a chance to live your very own personalized horror movie. The attraction was set up by Russ McKamey, who started it up in San Diego, California, back in the early 2010s. A lot of people in the local area back then knew about the infamous McKamey Manor, which had been the source of many controversies and news headlines. A lot of stories were circulating throughout the community about what was going on at the place, and some of those stories were dark to say the least. The attraction, which billed itself as an audience participation survival horror event, had come to be known as a real-life torture chamber run by a psycho. People were going into the manor looking for a fun time, only to leave with both mental and physical scars. Due to all these rumours and controversies, the manor had to relocate to 2 separate locations in Alabama and Tennessee, locations that you can still visit to this day. But if you do find yourself accepted onto a McKamey Manor tour, you should go in knowing that it's not like other haunted houses or immersive experiences. There aren't any zombies, or ghosts, or jump scares inside. There isn't even really a manor at all, as most of what will happen to you will take place in the back of a windowless van. What there are paid actors, who are legally allowed to bind you, gag you, and make your deepest and darkest fears come to life. Now, that might not sound like your idea of a fun Sunday afternoon, but there are quite a few thrill seekers who are attracted to that type of experience. An opportunity to be pushed to their limits. That's why back in 2015, there was a waiting list of about 27,000 people, all of whom wanted to gain access to McKamey Manor. Well, that, and the chance to win $20,000. See, there's no charge to enter McKamey Manor at all. You just have to add your name to the sign-up list, and if McKamey selects you after a background check, it's completely free to enter. All the owner requests is that you bring a bag of dog food with you on the day of your event, which he'll donate to a local greyhound shelter. Once inside, there are just 2 rules. No swearing, and no attacking the actors. If you can last 10 hours inside the manor, McKamey himself guarantees to pay you the $20,000 prize money. So far, not a single person has lasted the whole 10 hours. So, what are the controversies with the place? Well, we'll get to that shortly. First, let's assume you sign up to visit the manor and all goes well. You get selected, and Russ McKamey asks you to come and face your fears for a chance to win a fat cash prize. Before you start your day at the manor, you'll have to sign a suspicious legal document. A 40-page waiver. Here are a few of the waiver's main points. Article 19. Participant was warned numerous times about the intensity of McKamey Manor, and by the owners and other members of the crew, that you really don't want to do this. Article 20. Participant agrees and understands that your life in reality is not in danger, and that this is just a game. Article 21. Participant agrees and understands that during the tour and while in the van, they will not be secured by a seatbelt or any other safety device. Article 22. Participant understands and agrees that they are not being tortured and that this is just a game. Article 23. Participant understands and agrees that they are not being beat up, kicked, slugged, or actually physically harmed. They will be roughed up, but no one is there to hurt you. Knowing that, McCamey Manor is very rough and not for the meek. Participant will have bumps, bruises, possible black eyes, swelling of the face, etc. Article 24. Participant understands and agrees that they are never being held against their will. After stressing several times that the experience is just a game, the points in the waiver start to become more and more bizarre. Article 28. Participant fully understands that by signing this waiver, they are giving McCamey Manor permission to keep nothing off the table. Everything imaginable can and will happen inside McCamey Manor. You're aware of this, and are giving full permission for any action that may happen inside McCamey Manor. Article 29. Participant agrees to and has full knowledge that if selected to visit the barber, participant may leave McCamey Manor completely bald, including eyebrows. Article 30. Participant agrees and acknowledges that mousetraps are used within the tour, which may result in bruising, cutting, or breakage of fingers. Article 31. Participant agrees that if selected, they could be buried alive under 12 feet of dirt and rock, to which they will have a limited amount of air, and that they will have to figure out how to escape, and they could possibly breathe in a significant amount of dirt, dust, or foreign objects that may cause death if participant does not breathe properly or hold their breath at the right time. Article 32. Participant agrees to partake, if selected to participate, in a height stunt that involves walking a plank 25 meters above the ground without a safety net. Article 33. Participant agrees that if selected, they will come into contact with a variety of live, poisonous animals. It's the participant's responsibility to not panic or agitate the animals. If the participant is bitten, it's because the participant made a sudden movement within a confined, secured environment. Many people in the past have signed this waiver after either not reading it properly or assuming it was all just designed to frighten them. There's no way the attraction could be that extreme, right? Well, many former participants have come forward saying that McCamey Manor is more than just a game, and that in their eyes, they were undoubtedly the non-consenting victims of torture. Case in point, Amy Mulligan. Amy Mulligan was selected to take part in the McCamey Manor tour when it was still operating in San Diego. Assured that it was all just a game, she willingly signed the waiver and excitedly entered the manor, with high hopes of winning the $20,000 prize. According to Amy though, her experience was more than a game. Along with the cuts and bruises she was warned about, she was also waterboarded, to the point that she almost drowned, and her body started involuntarily thrashing around. She begged for the so-called actors to stop, told them that she couldn't breathe, but they apparently just laughed in her face and told her, "You're not done yet." She continually withdrew her consent, telling them that she wanted the tour to stop, but she was ignored again and again. The actors were enjoying their job too much. In her words, "My hair was wrapped around my neck, and I started to freak out. I'm telling them I can't breathe, and they're just laughing and doing it more." Amy says that she was convinced in that moment that she had entered a house of psychos, and that she wouldn't make it out with her life. Thankfully, she did, and at the end of it all, was asked for a video interview by McCamey. All of the tours at the manor are recorded, so that McCamey can advertise his attraction online. He even has his own YouTube account, where he uploads some of his tours, along with other content, such as these post-tour interviews. In hers, Amy said that despite her traumatic experience, she actually had a great time at the manor. The only reason she said that, however, was because she wanted McCamey to upload her experience on the internet. That way, she'd have proof that she was indeed tortured. Well, McCamey did indeed upload the video of Amy's experience at the manor, but, according to her, he edited out the most extreme parts. Other past thrill seekers have said that they were forced to give positive video interviews at the end of their tours, terrified about what might happen if they didn't. One such person was Laura Hertz Brotherton. Before she was allowed to come to the manor and face her fears, Laura was told that she had to prove her loyalty to McCamey by completing a set of simple tasks. Brotherton found these preliminary tasks to be fun, and it got her excited about her upcoming tour. When the day of her event finally arrived, she was surprised when she met the owner, Russ McKamey himself. Apparently, he was exceptionally cold towards her. Laura had arrived at the manor with her boyfriend. After signing her waiver, the first thing McKamey did was publicly expose an affair Laura was having with another man online. She had secretly engaged with another fan of McKamey Manor on Facebook and started a romantic relationship with him. Laura's boyfriend was actually aware of this, but the wife of her new romantic partner was not. Despite being humiliated, Laura was determined to persevere. McKamey, who was apparently morally offended when he found out she was having an affair, remained cold to her for the duration of her tour, and, according to Laura, her experience was much more intense than that of other guests at the manor. When asked about her day there, Laura said, "I was waterboarded, I was tased, I was whipped. I still have scars of everything they did to me. I was repeatedly hit in the face, over and over and over again, like open-handed, as hard as a man can hit a woman in the face." Laura went on to add that her mouth was duct-taped, her eyes blindfolded, and that she was submerged in water by her ankles. Just like Amy, she was held under the water for so long that her body began to spasm involuntarily. After this, Laura was forced to dig a hole in the earth with her bare hands. She was then thrown inside said hole before being buried alive with only a small straw through which to breathe. She was left alone underground for 30 minutes. After she was finally unearthed and stopped gasping for breath, she repeated the safe word for several minutes before finally being allowed to leave. Laura, who was admitted to hospital after her tour, later went on to tell the authorities about what happened to her at the manor. She presented them with photos of herself, showing her swollen face, cut and bruised skin, puffy lips, fractured foot, and lumped head. Despite this, the authorities said they couldn't help her due to the waiver that she had signed. Russ McKamey didn't even deny any of the injuries he caused her, and even admitted to exposing her affair online. "Any personal information we have," said McKamey, "we'll use it against you in the tour." Eventually, McKamey Manor was forced to move out of San Diego and relocate to Alabama and Tennessee, two separate locations. McKamey himself says that the move was for financial reasons, though many believe it's because those states would be more likely to side with him if a participant ever tried to sue him, not to mention the bad reputation he and his experience had in the San Diego community. The authorities have been called to the manor multiple times by local residents, appalled by McKamey's unethical practices. One time, the police even found a woman locked in a basement there. She was bruised, shivering, and her mouth was gagged with duct tape. After confirming that what was happening to her was consensual, the authorities had no choice but to leave. So, McKamey Manor is obviously an extreme immersive event to put it lightly, but even so, everything is supposedly above board and legal. Supposedly being the key word. Here's where a little conspiracy comes into the mix. A few conspiracies, actually. Let's start with the first question. How does McKamey pay for all of this? Like I said before, he doesn't charge anybody to come to the manor. All his guests have to do is bring a bag of dog food. That's not exactly a great business model. With insurance costs, an on-site EMT to pay, actors, and general upkeep, it's estimated that each tour costs him about $500 to put on. McKamey is a US Navy veteran. All of the actors are ex-military too. Where does he find the money to run multiple haunts each weekend? Some theorize that he must make a profit from the tour somehow. As mentioned, all of the tours are filmed with high-quality cameras and lighting. Some people believe that McKamey sells the most extreme footage on the dark web, or perhaps even streams it to paying viewers. Some even think he allows these viewers to vote on what happens to each guest next, and for how long. If we've learned anything from other mysteries on this channel, it's that there are plenty of sick individuals in the world who'd be willing to pay for that kind of content. Others think that McKamey live streams the tours to a betting pool in Las Vegas. If you ain't paying for the product, you are the product kind of thing. McKamey himself claims he doesn't make any money from the tours whatsoever. That sounds suspicious to a lot of folks, and when taking into account the high production quality of his video content, you have to ask yourself, is the manor even real at all? The news stories, controversies, being chased out of San Diego, the excessively grotesque video footage, it could all just be a way to drum up publicity, a viral marketing campaign. Though the manor experience is indeed real, perhaps it's a lot more tame in reality than the stories and media would have us believe. After all, some of the stories that have come out of the manor are so extreme, you have to wonder how McKamey hasn't either been sued into the ground or downright locked up. Sure, he gets his guests to sign a waiver, but could such a waiver even be legally binding? Then again, it's also been claimed that he has been sued many times before, but just hasn't publicly admitted to it. And then there's the question of the $20,000 prize, which may not even exist. Some think that McKamey just uses that as a way to lure people into signing up for his manor experience, as he gets his thrills from inflicting pain on others, and that he only selects people who he and his crew can easily manipulate. Manipulate into obedience, and into not going public with their stories. Russ McKamey maintains that the $20,000 prize is indeed real and very winnable, though one Redditor recalls a Marine who came close to completing the 10-hour-long challenge, only for Russ to call it all off at the very last moment, saying that the guest had had enough and that he was concerned for his safety. In conclusion, McKamey Manor is a place shrouded in a lot of mystery. It's not entirely clear what goes on behind its walls, or more often than not, van walls, but if some of the stories out there are anything to go by, and there are a lot of them, then I personally wouldn't recommend adding your name to the waiting list. There's a series on Netflix called Dark Tourist, where the host visits McKamey Manor. You can check that out if you want to hear and see more about this mysterious place. Hey guys, Lazy here, and thank you very much for listening. So this video was a little different to usual, but I hope you got a kick out of it nonetheless. Just before this video ends, I'd just like to say that although McKamey Manor has this crazy reputation, which it may or may not deserve, don't let this video tarnish your thoughts about other immersive horror experiences in general. There are a lot of reputable, amazing haunts out there, so it's definitely an industry worth supporting if you're a fan of all things creepy. Anyway guys, that about wraps things up for this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and before we end, I'd just like to say a huge shout out to all of my supporters on Patreon, especially my biggest supporters. Joey Hatfield, Charlie Grant, Let's kick this video off with a weird one. The case of Mateusz Kowecki, a 30-year-old Polish man and father-to-be. Mateusz was living with his father in Hanover, Germany at the time. His pregnant fiancée was still based in northwest Poland, in a small village called Lipia Góra. He lived apart from her for work purposes. On March 28, 2018, Mateusz's fiancée went into labour. The baby was on the way, and so was he. He hopped in his car at 11:30 PM and set off on his 400-mile journey to his fiancée. He estimated that he'd arrive around 8 or 9 AM the following morning. The thing is, Mateusz never made it to his destination. Somewhere along the way, he disappeared. 6 months later, he'd turn up dead in his family's barn, his head detached from his torso. Let's go into the details. March 29th, 10:30 AM. Mateusz calls his father up, tells him that he's stuck in heavy traffic on the Polish-German border. He still has around 130 miles to go before he makes it to his fiancée. Mateusz then sends a text to his fiancée, telling her that he'll be there in about 2 hours. This is the last known communication he had with anyone. 5 PM rolls around, and there's still no sign of Mateusz in Lipia Góra. His phone rings, but he never answers. His fiancée, understandably worried, calls up Mateusz's sister and mother. They file a missing persons report in both Poland and Germany. Unfortunately, so long as the Polish authorities are on the case, the German police decide not to get involved. The Polish police try to track down Mateusz using the ping from his cell phone, which was still on for a couple of days after he disappeared. But since he was using a German SIM card, they failed to pinpoint its location. Since Mateusz apparently vanished in Poland, the German authorities are also unable to trace the phone. Thing is, the German-Polish border is unmanned, so there was actually no definitive way to prove exactly where he vanished, and Polish investigators said his phone never even connected to a Polish network. There was obviously a huge disconnect between the German and Polish authorities, and the German police were being particularly uncooperative. For 6 months, there are no new clues. Gas station employees are asked if they'd seen him. Surveillance footage is checked and rechecked. Posters are put up. His family makes TV appearances appealing for information. Nothing comes of any of it. Then, on September 12th, things took a dark and unexpected turn. Mateusz's mother was at the family home in southwest Poland, 400 miles away from the northwestern village his fiancée lived in. One of her neighbors came to the house, complaining about the family barn. There was a putrid smell coming from it. The stench was so bad that the neighbor had to complain. Mateusz's mother hadn't noticed any bad smell at all. It's unclear why. Maybe her mind was elsewhere, thinking about her missing son. Whatever the reason, she agreed to let the neighbor go into the barn and find the source of the odor. The barn was half walled off, creating a room with a visible attic above it. The neighbor climbed up and scanned the attic area. He noticed a pile of clothes on the floor. He looked at them closer. Turns out, it wasn't a pile of clothes at all. It was a human body, the head detached from the torso. Above it were 2 nooses swinging from the rafters. A backpack near the body was filled with items that belonged to Mateusz. The body was far too decomposed to ID visually, but authorities quickly determined it to be him, and ruled that he had taken his own life. They said that he had hung himself from one of the ropes months before, and that because of decomposition, his head and body had become detached. When they did, they fell to the floor. Strange, right? The whole situation didn't seem to make much sense at all. Remember, Mateusz was on his way to the northwest of Poland, but his family lived in the southwest, a huge distance away. Not to mention, some strange things came to light shortly after the authorities gave up on the investigation. 4 days after finding Mateusz's remains, one of his boots was found in the barn. His detached foot was still inside it. There was nothing about that in the coroner's report. The detectives had clearly done a bad job at collecting evidence. Not to mention, they ignored the fact that all of Mateusz's teeth had been knocked out and stuck to his clothes with blood. It's possible that they all just came out when his head hit the floor, but many experts think that's very unlikely. Inside Mateusz's backpack, there was another strange discovery. An orange juice box. Mateusz famously hated orange juice. His phone was also in the backpack, and it came to light that he had made one final phone call after all. It was to his uncle on March 30th, the day after he disappeared. The call lasted for less than a second. His uncle's phone didn't even ring, it was so short. Was this an accidental dial, or a last-ditch call for help? Strangest of all is Mateusz's car. It's never been found. Not at the scene, not abandoned or sold on, not anywhere. The keys and registration were also never found, which is strange seeing how Mateusz's wallet was still in his backpack. Why weren't his keys? There were also public transport tickets on Mateusz that were dated after he disappeared. Why had he left his car? And where? Finally, the attic area where Mateusz was found was clearly visible from the ground floor of the barn. The family used the barn throughout the summer and hadn't noticed anything. If Mateusz had been up there swinging from the ropes the entire time, it seems very unlikely they would have missed him. So, what are we to make of all of this? Were the authorities right to end their investigation? Or is there more to this case? Why would an excited father-to-be drive for hundreds of miles to his family barn, only to end his life without telling anyone? Why did the family not notice him inside the barn if the area was so visible? What happened to his car, and what was up with the public transport tickets? So many questions. Makes you wonder whether the whole scene was staged by somebody. It's hard to know what to make of this one. Let me know what your theories are down below in the comments. Born and raised in South Korea, Cindy Song moved to Virginia at the age of 15 to live with her aunt and uncle and attend high school. After graduating, she attended Pennsylvania State University. On Halloween night 2001, Cindy, now 21 and a senior, went out partying with two of her close friends, Lisa Kim and Stacy Paik. Cindy was dressed as a bunny girl, pink fluffy ears and all. The three of them went to Players Nightclub and partied there until 2 AM. They then went to a friend's apartment and played some video games. At 4 AM, Stacy dropped Cindy off at her off-campus apartment and the pair of them said their goodbyes. Stacy watched as Cindy walked off towards her apartment, but didn't actually see her go inside before she drove off. Cindy hasn't been seen or heard from since. 2 days after Halloween, Cindy was reported missing. Her apartment was searched, but there were no signs of a forced entry or a struggle. The false eyelashes that she had been wearing for Halloween were found on a counter, alongside her backpack and cell phone. The only things missing were her keys and her purse, which contained her ID and credit cards. Her bunny costume was nowhere in the apartment, suggesting that she was still wearing it when she vanished. Her phone hadn't made or received any calls after she'd been dropped off. Her credit cards hadn't been used, and she hadn't received any suspicious emails or anything. So, what happened to the poor girl? Well, we don't know, but here's the leading theory. After entering her apartment and taking off her eyelashes, Cindy grabbed her purse and keys, and, still wearing her costume, went to a store that was open 24/7 to grab some supplies. This store was only 200 yards away from her apartment. Either on her way to the store or on her way back to her apartment, she was captured by some unknown individual or individuals and forced into their vehicle. There's only been one reported sighting of Cindy since that fateful night, and it came from 200 miles away from her apartment. A few days after she disappeared, a woman was walking through the Chinatown district of Philadelphia when she heard someone screaming and crying. She turned and saw an Asian woman matching Cindy's description in the back of a locked car. A man suddenly appeared and told the woman to get lost. In 2003, a man was arrested for burglary. His name was Paul Weekly, and he told the police a shocking story. He claimed that one of his associates, Hugo Selensky, and his accomplice named Michael Kukowski had taken Cindy while she was walking down the street. They took her back to Kukowski's house and kept her locked inside a walk-in safe. They had their way with her until she perished. Afterwards, they buried her somewhere. Kukowski apparently kept her bunny ears as a morbid souvenir. Things only got more weird from there. Kukowski had been on the run for a year for an unrelated crime. He had disappeared, along with his girlfriend, Tammy Fassett. Weekly claimed that Selensky, the other guy, had killed Kukowski and his girlfriend. Weekly led the cops to Selensky's house, where the remains of Kukowski and Tammy were dug up. He'd been telling the truth about that part at least. Bone fragments were also found in a burn pit, which belonged to 2 narcotics dealers. 7 other decomposed bodies were found on the property, though their identities still remain unknown. The thing is, none of the remains belonged to Cindy. None of the DNA matched. Selensky was sentenced to life in prison. As it stands, it remains unclear whether Weekly was telling the truth about Cindy, that she'd been picked up and locked in a walk-in safe. Obviously, there are some serious credibility issues, and the cops remain skeptical about his account. A search of Weekly's computer revealed that he had downloaded several articles about Cindy, so he could have learned about her case online and fabricated the story entirely. Selensky has always denied any involvement in Cindy's disappearance. Whatever the case, her remains have never been found. Here's a really bizarre case from a few years back. On December 12, 2014, a teenager in Economy, Pennsylvania, was passing by a wooded area. He saw something lying on the ground only 10 yards off the rural road. Upon closer inspection, he realized what it was. The embalmed, severed head of a woman. Her hair was grey and fluffy, her mouth was open, and, most strange of all, her eyes had been replaced by 2 red rubber balls. The boy immediately called the police, and, in a calm voice, told the operator, "I found a human head." Detectives had a sketch drawn up, showing what she may have looked like in life. Experts examined the head and determined that it had been professionally dismembered, cut with surgical delicacy. The cervical spine had been carefully cut out and removed, and the slice was clean. The leading theory, according to the investigators, is that the head was removed by a so-called body broker, somebody who removes body parts and sells them on for a profit. Due to the chemicals used to embalm the head, detectives have been unable to obtain any DNA. As such, the woman's identity remains unknown. Who she was, how she came to die, and why her head ended up in those woods in a small town near Pittsburgh remain a mystery. It's also unknown why her eyes had been removed and replaced. She'd been dismembered skillfully, but there was nothing professional about the rubber ball insertions. That had been a cheap, rough job. Perhaps they were sold on separately. Either way, it's unlikely we'll ever have any answers. If you do recognize the woman in the sketch, or know how she came to be left in those woods, please contact the Economy Police Department. We all know the expression, more money, more problems. Never thought I'd say that in a video, but this next mystery proves there's sometimes a lot of truth to that saying. This one focuses on Tom and Anne Elizabeth Hagen, a married Norwegian couple who lived together in Lørenskog, a suburb of Oslo. The pair lived a quiet life together in their relatively modest home in which they'd lived for the past 40 years. Both of them were grounded, down-to-earth, friendly people. If you passed them in the street, you'd have never guessed that Tom was a billionaire, co-founder of a company called Elcraft. The couple did their best to keep their wealth private. That all changed in July 2018, when a Norwegian newspaper published an article about Tom and how he'd made 174 million krone in the previous year. Nobody realized at the time, but this article may have been the catalyst that set this whole bizarre mystery into motion. Let's begin. It was October 31st, 2018, Halloween morning. Tom left for work in his unassuming Citroen car at 9 AM. He arrived there 10 or 15 minutes later. At 9:14, while home alone with their new puppy, Anne Elizabeth called a family member. Earlier reports said that this was her husband Tom, but this was later changed to simply say a family member. 9:48. Electrician and neighbour Tommy Skansen calls Anne Elizabeth's cell phone. She had asked him to come over and help switch out some light fixtures. She doesn't pick up the phone. More people tried to contact Anne Elizabeth throughout the day. Nobody can get through to her. Everyone assumes she's just busy. At 1:30 PM, Tom arrives home. He can't find his wife anywhere. What he does find are a number of her personal belongings lying on a chair, and a sinister note written in broken Norwegian. It's a ransom note. "We have your wife. We demand 9 million euros in the cryptocurrency Monero. If you don't pay up, a video of your wife being killed will be posted online." The note goes on to say that Tom and the rest of his family are being watched. Should he contact the authorities, his wife's life will be in grave danger. Instructions on how to pay the captors are included. At some point between 9:14 and 9:48, Anne Elizabeth had been taken. Tom ignored her captor's threats and contacted the police at 2:07 p.m. They meet with him in secret at a gas station. An investigation begins. The authorities are careful not to let any information leak to the public, worried that that might mean the end of Anne Elizabeth. They advise Tom not to pay his wife's captors anything until he has proof of life, evidence that she is still alive. If he pays, he'll have nothing left to bargain with. The whole investigation is kept extremely secret, and the Norwegian media agree not to publish anything about Anne Elizabeth's disappearance. Let's go over what happened month by month. November. Small traces of Anne Elizabeth's blood are found inside the house. The amount is reported as not unusual and may or may not have been from the day she was taken. Tom continues to go to work as to not draw attention, but his mood is described as seeming extremely depressed by his employees. Realizing that something's up, the rest of the family finally find out about Anne Elizabeth. Everyone is sworn to silence. December. The investigation continues, and everything is still tightly under wraps. January. After 10 weeks of secrecy, the media are finally allowed to report about the case. The authorities also release CCTV footage taken from outside Tom Hagen's workplace. In the video, a man can be seen walking down the road next to Tom's office at 7:36 a.m. on the morning of his wife's disappearance. The man then abruptly stops, turns around, and walks back from where he came. 24 minutes later, another man can be seen walking down the same way. These men may well have been lookouts, making sure that Tom was out of the way. Now that Tom's neighbours know that Anne Elizabeth is missing, one of them comes forward with information. On the morning she went missing, they saw a silver SUV take what they described as a weird shortcut over a patch of grass towards the Hagens' house. She may well have been taken away in this vehicle. By the end of the month, the family receives a new message from Anne Elizabeth's captors. They don't say much, and people start to wonder why they've waited so long to get in contact. They provide no proof of Anne Elizabeth's well-being. Rumours start to spread about who's behind it all. June, and there's no new word from her captors. No new leads, nothing. The police decide to change their main hypothesis. They now say that Anne Elizabeth was killed, and that the ransom note was simply a red herring. July 8th. Tom Hagen's lawyers receive an email from the dark web, again written in broken Norwegian. The email contained information only a perpetrator would know. It said that if Tom wanted proof his wife was still alive, he'd have to pay up. Tom ignores the cops' advice and wires them 1.3 million euros in cryptocurrency. He gets nothing in return, and, to this day, still hasn't heard back from whoever sent the email. And that brings us to the present day. As of right now, just over a year since she was taken, Anne Elizabeth's whereabouts and well-being remain unknown. Who took her? Why did they take so long to make contact? Is she even still alive? Perhaps in time we'll have some answers. The investigation is still ongoing. I'd like to thank Simon Alkemir for suggesting this next mystery to me, and for doing such a fantastic write-up in his email. The year was 1930. Joseph Moisinski and his mistress, Catherine May, were in a car at a popular Lover's Lane near College Park, New York. Just as things were getting a little steamy, a small man with a thick German accent stuck his gun through the open driver's side window. He ordered Joseph into the driver's seat and then sat down behind him, commanding him to start the car. As soon as the engine started, the stranger shot Moisinski behind the right ear. When his head spun around, the man shot him in the mouth for good measure. The unknown man then had his way with Catherine. When he'd finished, the stranger exited the car and searched through Moisinski's inner coat pocket, pulling out some papers. He studied them and then set them on fire. He then took Catherine to the local bus depot so she could get home. On board the bus, the stranger handed her a folded piece of paper. He told her to read it the following day. He said goodnight and hopped off the bus, vanishing into the night. Catherine opened the note. Stamped in red ink was a mysterious code. Joseph Moisinski, 3X, 3-X-097. She was so afraid and traumatized that she went to bed without notifying the authorities. After finding Moisinski in the car, the cops tracked down Catherine. She hadn't told them about the incident, so you can see why they thought she might be behind it all. For 3 full days without sleep, they interrogated her. And then the whole story changed. On the 4th day, the editor of the New York Journal received a letter on pink paper. It was from the perp. The letter said that Moisinski was a dirty little rat and included a description of the weapon and the ammo used to end his life. The note ended with a threat. 14 more of Moisinski's friends will join him. The letter was signed 3X, the man behind the gun. It was postmarked a few hours before the attack on Moisinski took place. This guy meant business. Here's where things start getting strange. Another letter arrived soon after, written in stationery from Catherine's place of work while she was still in custody. It said that Catherine was innocent. The writer claimed to be an agent for a secret international order called the Red Diamond of Russia, who were still searching for documents that weren't in Moisinski's coat pocket. Despite the threat to kill 14 more people, the police didn't publish the letters. Well, 3X stayed true to his word. On June 16th, a young radio technician named Noel Soley and his companion, Elizabeth Ring, were sitting in a parked car near Creedmoor, Queens. A short man with a German accent approached them and asked to see Mr. Soley's driver's license. Soley handed it over. The stranger looked at it and said, "You're the guy we're looking for. You're gonna get what Joe got." He then shot Soley in the mouth. Soley managed to say, "I'm not the guy you're looking for." The stranger calmly walked behind the car and checked the license plate, then walked back to Soley, told him he was the right guy, and then shot him in the head. The man rifled through Soley's pockets. He found some papers, exclaimed, "I have them," and then, just like before, took the victim's female companion to the bus stop and gave her a red stamped note which read, "Soley, 3X." Subsequently, the New York Journal received a new letter from an unknown person. The note said, "We always get them through their women." It also said that a missing document and some of their money was found on Soley, and demanded that the paper publish some encoded messages, or else 13 more men and 1 woman would be slain. A similar letter was also received by the police, along with a shell casing. Another mysterious note was sent to Moisinski's brother, threatening him and demanding those papers. Finally, 2 weeks after all of this began, a final letter came in. 3X claimed that his mission was over, and that all 3 documents had been recovered. He talked about the Red Diamond of Russia, the organization he was a part of, and explained that Moisinski and Soley were former members that had turned against them. They'd stolen some incriminating documents, and he had been chosen as their killer by a ritual. Said that he'd been sent to the country to put things right. The letter ended with, "This is final. You know what we want you to know. Quiet your people and tell them that 3X is no more." For years afterwards, the incidents popped in and out of the news. Fake letters, false confessions, and occasional suspects. But despite the reward reaching $1 million, and several people being prosecuted for trying to commit fraud to obtain it, no progress was made on the case. So, what do you think? Was 3X really some secret organization's agent, or just a psychopath who had to find a way to justify his actions? Whatever the case, his identity remains a mystery to this day. Hey guys, Lazy here, and thank you very much for listening. Well, it's been a little while now, but I'm back. I hope you enjoyed these mysteries. Actually, the hardest part wasn't finding them, it was deciding which ones to use. Actually, I found a bunch of really good ones, but I think this was a nice collection. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, remember to smash that. Number 1. Anaheim, California, 1980. For several months, a single mother named Dorothy Scott had been receiving threatening calls from an obsessive stalker. She had confided in friends and family, stating that the voice sounded familiar, but that she could never quite place it. Having a stalker can be a terrifying ordeal, especially one that constantly calls you up, telling you that they're going to cut you into pieces so that your body will never be found. The caller would routinely describe what Dorothy was wearing or doing at any given moment, just to prove that he was keeping a close and constant eye on her. Dorothy coped as best as she could, and even took up karate lessons as a means of self-protection. She also considered buying a handgun. For the most part, life continued as normal. Until the identity of her stalker was uncovered, there was little else she could do to stop the constant abuse. She continued to go to work, since she needed the money to support her son, Sean. It was at work, on May 28th, that one of her co-workers, Conrad Bostron, fell sick, with a large red mark appearing on his arm. Dorothy and another employee, Pam Head, took him to the hospital. It was in the emergency room that doctors came to a surprising conclusion. Conrad had been bitten by a spider, and his arm had become infected. This seemed odd, since he couldn't place a time when this could have happened. Supposing that certain things like this can go unnoticed, he was treated by the doctors well into the night, with Dorothy and Pam waiting for him the entire time. There wasn't any rush, since Dorothy knew that her son was being well looked after by her parents while she was at work. Finally, after hours of examination and treatment, Conrad was discharged, and the three readied themselves to leave. It was then that Dorothy told her two associates to wait for her inside, while she went to get the car and pull it around, a decision that would prove to have horrific consequences. After an unusually long wait, Conrad and Pam were relieved to see Dorothy's car fast approaching the entrance. Actually, it was going a little too fast, and showed no intention of stopping. The high beams flicked on, temporarily blinding them both, and the car sped past them and out onto the main road. Dorothy would never be seen again. Her car was found abandoned 10 miles away in a Santa Ana alleyway. It was on fire. No trace of Dorothy could be found inside. Now, this case is disturbing in its own right, but what makes it particularly chilling is the abductor's twisted and sadistic dedication to causing grief. Almost every Wednesday for the next 4 years, Dorothy's mother would receive a daytime call when she was home alone. Each time, it was the same low, gruff male voice, saying things like, "Is Dorothy there? I've got her. I killed her." Whoever the caller was, he wasn't stupid. He never stayed on the line long enough to be traced. Even though many of the calls were recorded, he'd been using an obviously disguised voice. As such, nobody could identify him. In mid-1984, just over 4 years after Dorothy had disappeared, a construction worker happened upon a set of dog bones in some brush off Santa Ana Canyon Road. Just underneath these dog bones, covered only by light soil, were a human pelvis, an arm, 2 thigh bones, and a skull. These bones were later identified to be Dorothy Scott's. A watch found along with the body had stopped at 12:30 AM, May 29th, 1980. On the day that the newspapers announced that Dorothy's body had been found, the Scott family received 2 final calls. It was the same familiar voice. "Is Dorothy there?" Whoever killed Dorothy was sick enough to have tormented her parents for the best part of 4 years, never allowing them to find closure or come to terms with their loss. Such sadistic dedication suggests that the killer was totally psychopathic. With such a disregard for human life, it's completely possible that she wasn't this man's only victim. Both of Dorothy's parents have since passed away, never knowing the identity of the man that murdered their daughter in 1980. As time ticks by, it seems more and more unlikely that anyone else ever will either. Other than him, of course. Number 2. Encephalitis lethargica, also known as sleepy sickness, was a mysterious plague that suddenly appeared in 1916 and affected millions of people. It attacked the nervous system of the victims, killing a third of those who became infected. Another third recovered, but were mostly left with severe neurological damage. What makes this disease particularly disturbing, however, is what it did to the remaining third. They were left in a state somewhere between life and death, plunged into a slumber that lasted for months, years, in some cases decades. In 1928, it had completely vanished, and nobody knows why. Here's some old footage from 1925 that shows a woman suffering from the sleeping plague. Some of you might be familiar with the disease, as it was the subject of the movie Awakenings with Robin Williams and Robert De Niro, which in turn was based on a book by the same name. It was written by a British neurologist called Oliver Sacks, who helped survivors of the sleepy sickness outbreak, but who remained alive only as living statues. One such patient remained in a statue-like state for over 70 years. Dr. Sacks discovered that administering L-Dopa to those affected by the sickness brought them back to a state of conscious lucidity, if only for a short while. The fact that we still have no idea why the sickness appeared and disappeared so suddenly is somewhat unsettling, but accounts from the lucky ones who recovered revealed the creepy thoughts that swirled in the heads of the dreamers. One patient, known only as Miss R, said that she dreamed she was imprisoned in an inescapable castle, but the castle had the form and shape of herself. She dreamed that she had become a living, sentient statue of stone. She dreamed that the world had come to a stop. She dreamed that she had fallen into a sleep so deep, nothing could wake her. She dreamed of a death that was different from death. Imagine how it must feel to be lost in an inescapable nightmare, locked in a body frozen in sleep. As Dr. Sacks observed while treating his patients, many were forgotten about and left to live out the rest of their statued existence in hospitals, nursing homes and asylums, hundreds of thousands of them passing away one by one. During their lucid moments on L-Dopa, he stated that many accepted their hopeless situation with a mournful dignity. Others were resentful, angry about the years that were stolen from them. As Sacks wrote, they yearned incessantly for a twofold miracle, not only for a cure for their sickness, but an indemnification for the